we're a local business, and I think that's really important, and I think it's more important now to support local than it has been in the past. We know how challenging it is for small businesses. I think obviously there's some optimism in the air. I was really optimistic when I came to work on Wednesday because I knew things were opening up and the weather was really good. It's summer, and there's no better place I'd rather be in the summer than really at a cottage.
Yeah, exactly. Nice segue. So let's talk about cottages. A recent story in the National Post discussed the fact that cottage life is becoming a pipe dream for a lot of people. They just can't afford it, right? Mm-hmm. Even for the wealthy, or the so-called wealthy, it's becoming out of reach. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a luxury item. And, to bring it back to Nova Scotia a little bit, Dr. Strang said straight out, it's the elite that have second homes. And, if you have, a trailer in a seasonal campground, if you have a cottage, if you have a second home, you are the elite. And we need to worry really about people's primary housing and the place that you're going to live, the majority of your time. And, cottages aren't for everyone. It's an expense. And it's sometimes as much or more expense than your primary residence. I've owned cottages before, and I can tell you, what, I love the cottage. But, the mentality of the cottage for me changed over time.
How so?
When I first bought it, it was the excitement of buying something, doing the renovations, enjoying it on the weekends, things like this. And where I bought my cottage, I owned a cottage on the eastern shore of Nova Scotia in a small community called Salmon River Bridge. And for those of you who are familiar with the eastern shore, it's near the head of Jador. And, I really loved it down there, but it was far, I found. It was an hour away. And the challenge with the eastern shore, some of the best beaches in Nova Scotia are on the eastern shore, in my opinion. But there's not the amenities. And there's
Kentville and some of those places around there, right?
Well,
you're talking Bay of Fundy, right?
No, I'm talking about
the Eastern Shore.
Eastern Shore.
Right, I get
so
you.
There's Martinique Beach and Clam Harbor, and there's some good stuff down there. But to get a really good proper grocery store, you basically need to go into Porter's Lake, and that's where the South Shore wins, and that's where the South Shore really wins for me. I think the weather's better on the South Shore. And, the beaches, I think, are probably equally as good. And some people probably think they're better. But there's a lot more amenities and quality of life on the South Shore. And a lot better than on the Eastern Shore.
What goes into mortgage lending when it comes to cottages? What are some of the... So somebody comes into you and they say, look, we want a couple, a single person, whatever it might be, a potential client. Do you sometimes quickly realize the cottage isn't going to be... You're not going to be able to pull it off financially, first of all? Like, what are some of the red flags from clients you say?
Well, I think the first question I always ask is, what type of property is it really? Is it a type A property or a type B? So a type A is a home. A type B is something that's lacking something that would make it a home. So a type B property could be a cottage that's on posts, beams. It could be a cottage that uses lake water. Maybe there's a holding tank. Maybe there's not year-round access. Maybe there's not a central heating system. And if there's a property that lacks any of those things or many of those things, it's considered a type B property. It cannot be considered as your primary residence. So you have to have another residence, or you need to have another rental. And that cost goes into play. And on a type B property, they also require a bigger down payment. So if you want high ratio insurance, you can only get that high ratio insurance from Sagen and Canada Guarantee. The Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation is not in the business of insuring cottage purchases. They are only in business of financing or insuring financing for primary residences. So you need a minimum down payment on a type B property of 10% down. So, right off the get-go, you need a little bit more skin in the game than the normal 5% for a regular owner-occupied property. But if it's really truly a second home, you can get away with as little as 5%.
Right.
But you need to be able to swing all your expenses from your primary residence. So that's the mortgage, that's property taxes, that's heat, and you need to swing all the expenses for the new property. That's heat, regardless if you're going to heat it or not, we still have to put a cost in for monthly heat, property taxes, and we still need to qualify that new mortgage on the stress test.
What about potentially using it as an Airbnb or a rental property part of the year?
Seasonal or short-term rentals are an absolute deal killer for mortgage financing. If I ever hear the word Airbnb, I'm like, cease and desist, honestly. I'm hearing our producers like laugh in the background.
Why?
Because the lenders don't want to get involved in the liability.
Yeah.
They don't want to get involved in the commercial aspect, licensing from the province, potential taxation issues. Short-term rentals, no go.
Really? So somebody needs or if you own your property, or if you're going to do that, you need
already need to own the property.
You need to own the property.
And even income from Airbnb, they don't want us to use. They will only really consider rental income if it is a long-term
Okay,
rental.
so let's say that you have your cottage already and you've got it mortgaged and you want to make it an Airbnb. Do you need to disclose that to your lender?
You don't need to disclose it because guess what? People's situations change all the time. But if you then Airbnb it and want to potentially refinance it down the road, that could be a problem.
Does that happen sometimes?
It does, because guess what? The lenders like use this fancy thing on the interwebs called Google, and they look up the address. And guess what? They look up the borrower too. They have access to more information than we have access to.
Right, so they'll find
some
out.
of the things that they find out. I'm just like, you little super sleuths. How did you find out that information? And they have systems that are connected to these underwriting platforms that do things like fraud checks and background checks and risk checks and terrorism checks and all these things.
Yeah.
And they click a button and it returns a report. And based on the report, they say the likeliness of, these potential risks to the lender. And it's not just financial risk that the lender's really thinking about. It's reputational risk.
Right.
This is why, if you are a delegate, if you are a government person from another country, it may be a challenge for you to get a mortgage here.
Good thing I'm not.
I know. Luckily, we're just regular people. And we're like regular people on News 95.7.
That's right. How do people get a hold of you, Clinton?
Check us out online at teamclinton.ca/radio. We'd love to help. Thanks for all our loyal listeners. We're on season 3 of our show, and we're going to continue this all year long. And, I thank you, Todd, for, coming out and, being available on the weekend and, doing 7 days here on News 95.7. I think it's great, and it's lots of great content.
Absolutely. So, again, teamclinton.ca, that's the best way because you get a team. It's not just you.
Yeah, we have a whole team of people, and, I still see clients every day, and I get asked if I'm taking new clients. We're always taking new clients. And, we answer the phone, Monday to Friday, and we'd love to help.
Some people want the special Clinton treatment, though, right?
They do, and I help still a lot of clients. I see clients full time,
Yeah.
So don't get me wrong. I love doing this stuff, but I'm still a mortgage broker, and I still see clients,
Right.
and we'd love to help.
Clinton, it's always a distinct pleasure to have these chats. It's been a great hour. Thank you so much, by the way. Appreciate it.
And happy weekend. Enjoy the weather, and thanks for tuning in, guys.
That's right. It's Mortgage 101, your guide to home ownership with Clinton Wilkins and myself, Todd Veinotte, right here on News 95.7. Thanks for listening.